is on the slave system, and once again, it's chapter 13, lesson 3. Okay. The slaves' daily schedule was kind of like way hard for them, and at 3 a.m. they got out of bed and tended to the animals, and from that time till 6 a.m. At 6 a.m. they did their prayers. At 7 a.m. they started work. At 12 they had lunch, as most of us do. At 1 they returned to work. At 7 they had dinner. At 8 they returned to work again. And at 11 they had lights out. So they practically had like only a few hours of sleep every day.
Their jobs for slaves, including butlers, cooks, nurses, blacksmiths, carpentry, and they can work in the fields.
Okay, for their religion, many slaves were Christians. They came to see themselves like the slave in the Old Testament as God's chosen people, Hebrew Jew slaves. Some slaves sang spirituals and emotional Christian songs. One of the songs are The Heavenly Road reflected slaves' belief in equality in the eyes of God. They worshiped God secretly without the slaveholder knowing, because they would get in trouble for praise. God when they would need to be working. For punishments for slaves, there was no protections from their masters or slaveholders. Some of the punishments were slitting of the ears, breaking of limbs, and when they broke the limbs, amputation was always necessary. Beating eyes out, and they were whipped and chained.
Working in the fields, they worked from sunup to sundown, no lunch breaks. The sickness and poor weather didn't stop them from working at all.
Okay.
Working in the planter's home, some works are cooks, butlers, nurses, often had better food, shelter, clothing. The planter's slaves had better things than field workers.
Okay, working at skilled jobs. Blacksmithing and carpentry are just some of the skilled jobs that slaves could actually work. Planters let their slaves sell their service to other people, and slaveholders collected part of what the slaves earned but let them keep the rest. Living conditions. Slaves had poor living conditions, and their houses were dirt floor cabins with few furnishings and leaky roofs. Clothing was a simple and cheap coarse fabric. Slaves tried to brighten up their clothes by sewing on designs from discarded scraps of material. They also had small food rations. Some planters allowed slaves to keep their own gardens for vegetables and chickens for eggs. And it added little variety to their diet by fishing or picking wild berries. Yes.
Okay, on the daily schedule they said that they had a lunch thing, but then when you said
That's for most of the only people who didn't get to eat for a lunch break were the slaves who worked in the fields. So.
What, planters did do lunch break?
Huh?
Planter slaves did do lunch breaks?
Yes. Okay, when you're done, you can hand them back to me or Kayla.